Good afternoon, everyone. It's Jeremy Benamy and Elon Goldenberg from J Street here on Word on the Street Live. We put these live streams out 4 p.m. on Wednesday on Substack, and you can then access them for the rest of the time immemorial on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and other streams where podcasts are available. And we are excited to have a new setup, Elon, with our own professional microphones. We're really taking this to the big leagues now.
Yeah, I'm excited about this. This makes us look fancy and professional and official.
Exactly. And that's how we've been able to land such an esteemed guest this week, Congressman Khanna of California's 17th District, Silicon Valley, in his fifth term in Congress and really emerging as a thought leader for both the progressive movement, but also on foreign policy for the Democratic Party. What does a progressive foreign policy in the 2020s and beyond look like for the Democratic Party? On the House Armed Services Committee, on the Special Select Committee on China, government oversight, very focused on issues of tech relating to Silicon Valley, of course, and on the environment as well. So, Congressman Khanna, it is great to have you here on Word on the Street Live. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me, and really an honor to be on. I'm a huge fan, as you know, of J Street's work, and I appreciate joining.
And I don't know that you've met Elon before, so I'm
Well,
glad.
yeah, such a background. What a incredible asset he is, having worked for Vice President Harris and Governor Walz, and steeped in foreign policy. It's a credit to you, Jeremy, that you recruit such talent.
Yeah, no, it's really, really great. And Elon, turn it over to you.
Yeah, no, and Congressman, great to meet you, and hope this is the first of many conversations. And yeah, I'll just start by asking you this, sort of our first question, and it's really, look, we're 22 months into now a war that, frankly, when I was working at the White House in October and December 23, when this all started, like none of us would have expected to have gone this long. We have a horrible humanitarian catastrophe unfolding in Gaza, and meanwhile, we've got the Israeli government talking about doubling down with a major new offensive in Gaza. I think today, just in the news, we saw, reports of significant new reserve call-ups of Israel IDF to go back into Gaza City again, something that they've done multiple times. And so really to just start it, we just wanted to get your assessment of like where we are at this moment and, where U.S. policy so far needs to go.
It's horrific. It's heartbreaking. It's an extraordinary humanitarian catastrophe that is taking place right before our eyes. And we have a moral, a political, and legal obligation to do everything possible to stop it. That means stopping arms sales for weapons that are being used by the Netanyahu government to kill civilians. It means speaking out forcefully against what Netanyahu is doing in a blank check and voting against what he's doing at the UN. And it means recognizing Palestinian state as Netanyahu and Likud try every day to undermine that possibility, and to follow Australia, to follow France, to follow the United Kingdom, and to follow Canada in doing so, a Palestinian state living side by side in peace with Israel as a Jewish democratic state. And of course, that Palestinian state would be demilitarized. It would not have Hamas. It would have free and fair elections.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, Jeremy, go
Yeah,
ahead.
do you want to follow up, Elon?
Yeah, I mean, I'm also just curious to get your take as we're talking about this, about, your assessment of where American policy is this morning in terms of what Trump has actually been doing over the last few months. I think we had this, and I just put out a piece, we had this dream and hope that, Donald Trump would come in and have all this leverage with Netanyahu and be able to use it to actually end this war. Personally, I don't think that's what we've seen at all. I think we've seen kind of the opposite. But where do you think, the U.S. is standing, and what do we, as a country need to be, what would you say to them if you actually had a chance to talk to the Trump administration guys, or when you do talk to them about trying to push them in a different direction?
Well, I never had that dream or hope of Donald Trump. I mean, Donald Trump has never seen, frankly, what Vice President Harris saw, which is that the self-determination of the Palestinian people has to be recognized. Trump has talked about developing Gaza into a tourist destination. He's talked about repatriating Gazans out of Gaza. He's had a policy of cruelty where we're denying visas to people in Gaza who've been coming to the United States for medical care. He is talking about basically trying to get Saudi Arabia and Egypt or these Arab countries to run Palestine without any sense of Palestinian self-determination. And I don't think Donald Trump is capable of seeing the world from a human rights centered lens, is from seeing the world in any way that is non-transactional. So it is for us in Congress and for people around the country to show the world that Donald Trump does not speak for all of America, that there is a significant population in the United States that believes that what Netanyahu is doing is morally wrong, that will stand up against the continued flow of unconditional weapons to Netanyahu that he's using to kill civilians, and that is going to stand up to reassert the importance of Palestinians having a national aspirations for a state that lives side by side with a secure Israel.
Congressman, I'm curious your assessment. Ilan and I go back and forth about this a lot about the Biden policies and what was done the last time that the Democrats were in charge. It's very clear, obviously, that Trump has absolutely no interest in pursuing the kinds of policies that result in Palestinian self-determination, and he's certainly not pursuing policies rooted in human rights or concepts of international law. But the Democratic Party, when it had its shot, not just in the Biden years, and I don't mean to pick on Ilan week after week on this, but in Obama,
I've been pretty clear that, Jeremy, I had some concerns with like what we did, as a number of us did.
I know. I can't resist the little jab, but the Biden years and the Obama years and the Clinton years, I mean, there's sort of been a democratic approach to this set of issues that has gotten us deeper into a hole, actually. So I'm curious what your assessment. We know that assessment of the Trump years is negative. What's your assessment of Democratic policy on this?
Well, look, we need a new vision. I mean, it's clear I was opposed to some of the policies that President Biden followed. I voted against the supplemental aid in April of 2024, along with about 40 Democrats. I said that we should have had a Palestinian speaker at the DNC. They kept sending me to Michigan. I said, that's not going to do it. We need a new direction of foreign policy. But I prefer now to look forward and to look at how can we to build a peace after this war, a just peace in that region. And there are several things that work in our favor. One is that you have now the Arab League, 22 Arab states, willing to recognize Israel as a democratic Jewish state and recognizing the need for Palestinian self-determination. So if you've coined this phrase, Jeremy, or at least you're the one who shared it with me, the 23-state solution, well, that was not possible under President Clinton, and that was not possible under President Obama. And that was not as possible under President Biden. It is possible today. Secondly, there's been a deep shift in American public opinion about the urgency of having a Palestinian state, about us not having a blank check to Netanyahu or Likud, and really pushing for a solution where you have a secure Palestinian state within an Israeli state. That has been a shift. I would argue that J Street today represents the majority center opinion of Jewish Americans, at least in the Democratic Party, if not the country. And that will be a constructive force. The politics of this matters, and the politics of it now in the United States are, in my view, easier than previous Democratic administrations have faced. And third, it's just shocked the conscience of the world. What's going on? The October 7th shocked the conscience of the world with the killing of 1,200 civilians. The fact that you still have hostages has shocked the conscience of the world. I mean, the young man who was emaciated and on the front pages of some of the papers. And then the killing of 60,000 Palestinians, the destruction of homes, that has shocked the conscience of the world, even if some of those were combatants, some significant percentage, just to put it in context, that is 3 times the civilian deaths of Ukraine, and it has shocked the conscience. And so while there was a sense in the United States that we could pivot to Asia, that we don't need to get bogged down in the Middle East, that our peer competitor is China, that let's make sure that we're working on a foreign policy that keeps us ahead of China, that makes sure that we're deterring any invasion in Taiwan, and let's not really get involved in this generational challenge. That's no longer the case. Now people say we have to get involved. After this war ends, we have to bring peace. We can never allow October 7th to happen again. We can never allow this kind of mass killing and destruction in Gaza to happen again. Peace and a just peace is urgent. And I think that gives us an opportunity to move forward.
Yeah, and I should say it feels like, and I want to get your reaction on this, Congressman. It feels like it's also the politics are changing even on the Hill, right? I mean, we had this vote in the Senate just a couple weeks ago where you had 28, 27, 28 if you count also Alyssa Slotkin, who didn't vote but made a comment at, sort of put out remarks afterwards because she wasn't there. But 28 out of 47 Democratic senators voting to block some arms sales to Israel. Just the vibe feels like it's changing on all of this, or even remarks by Pete Buttigieg and JB Pritzker, others in the last few days, kind of walking back and also taking this position on arms. It feels like things are really fundamentally moving in this space, and I'm curious to get your reaction on that and if that's how you see it.
I do. I mean, you had a majority of United States senators vote for Bernie Sanders' amendment to stop offensive weapons. Jamie Raskin, who is such a thoughtful member of Congress, is the latest co-sponsor of Delia Ramirez's bill to again stop offensive weapons into to Netanyahu while the war is continuing. I welcomed Pete Buttigieg uh, saying after I and Ben Rhodes and a few challenged him, saying that he would support the Sanders amendments and that he would support my letter of recognizing a Palestinian state. My view is we have to be inclusive. And I know people. I have a lot of respect, for example, for Secretary Blinken. I think his heart is in a two-state solution. We need an intergenerational, broad coalition in the United States to be able to bring peace. I don't think the solution is to either write off Mamdani and that wing of the party, and I don't think the solution is to write off people with years of experience like Secretary Blinken. I think the question is how do we bring together the moral energy of young people and the wisdom of people who have been trying to solve that issue and say America is going to be united in getting a two-state solution, and we're going to get it done. And I believe there's a historic opportunity to do that.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about the other side of the aisle because we're really aware of this sea change in the Democratic Party, and as you said, I think J Street is really carving a center lane in all of these discussions and bridging a lot of these differences. But I also see some movement on the Republican side, and you paired with Tom Massey on the War Powers Resolution, and we're seeing parts of the younger MAGA movement in particular that are really offended by what is happening in Gaza on a moral level and are speaking out against it in ways that I would never have expected to see happen. And so I'm curious if you see some sea changes on the Republican side as well, and whether that also creates some opportunity.
I do. I think there are two things going on. One is people are just tired and weary of war. They were weary of 20 years in Afghanistan. They recognize that the decision to stay that long was a mistake. They recognize that the Iraq War was a mistake. They understand that the consequences of the Libya invasion didn't turn out as expected. They understand that Yemen was a mistake, and they want to invest here in our country, in our schools, in our communities, in our jobs, and not have billions of dollars going overseas. So that they recognize that when we have these strikes on Iran, it's not just one and done. Now we have a stronger force posture in the Middle East. We have to spend more money in protecting our troops in the Middle East. And they don't want to see all of those resources going to a over $1 trillion Pentagon budget with defense contractors when it could be invested at home. And the second thing is the Americans, we like to think of ourselves conceived as a moral nation, which stands up as a moral leader of the world. And it shocks the conscience when you see pictures of children and women starving and dying. So I think that there is an opportunity for the Democratic Party to say we are going to renew America's moral leadership in the world. Yes, we are going to defend America's interests and security, but we're also going to exert statesmanship and diplomacy and help build up other nations that seek to have a democracy and economic development. I'm reminded, and I won't be too long, I was just in Atlanta. I met Jason Carter, President Carter's grandson. We had both interned for President Carter together in 1996. And one of my great honors after President Carter, in the last 10 years, I got to see him preach in Sunday school. And he said, you know, how he defines a superpower is, wouldn't it be amazing if the leaders of the world came to America and looked to the American president, American leaders, to see how we could bring peace, how we could solve problems, how we could move the world towards a greater justice. That's what it means to be a superpower. And I think that that is what a lot of young people around the country, both Democrats and Republicans, want to see.
Yeah, and I'm interested.
I know you've got a follow-up, Elon, but I just want to quickly jump in on the Carter thing because Carter is my political idol, and I started out working in his presidential campaign as a high school intern in 1976. So
Wow.
You've hit a real nerve there because Jimmy Carter is really the exemplar of what president can be in terms of U.S. moral leadership. And I'm just so excited that the executive director of the Carter Center's board is going to be joining J Street's board in the coming year.
Oh, wow, that's incredible.
Cement the tie there. So just thank you for bringing him up, and what a memory, and he's such an incredible inspiration. Back to you, Elon.
Yeah. No, and I was just going to follow up, like, we're talking about all the different people that we need to be engaging, from Jimmy Carter to the worlds of like Tucker Carlson and Theo Vaughn. And I know, Congressman, you've actually engaged in with some of those like types of personalities, like, and gone on and talked to them about some of these issues. And I'm just interested to get your take and how you're trying to communicate with them, and like just reach the broadest community possible, including some of these voters who used to vote for Democrats, especially amongst young people, and have pulled into the Trump world, and the role that this issue has played in that.
Look, I think there are two ways the Democratic Party can go, and I understand that there is a desire to say we have been stomped upon, we need to push back, we need to fight, we need take on MAGA. And of course, we need to take on the unconstitutional actions of this president and use every means in our disposal to stand up to this president. But I don't want to see a race to the bottom. This is a country that is exhausted. This is a country that is so deeply divided. This is a country that is tired. This is a country that sees the income inequality and wonders why my district has $14 trillion with 5 companies over $1 trillion, and the American dream is out of reach for so many. And they are hungry. They are desperate for leadership that is going to say, there is a better way for America. There is a better way in terms of our moral leadership. There's a better way to bring this country together. There's a better way to solve our economic divides. And the Democratic Party is going to provide that conviction-driven politics. And you know what? That's what John F. Kennedy did. That's what Jimmy Carter did. That's what Barack Obama did. That's what Bill Clinton did. Our party, in its DNA, has an aspirational vision for America. And I hope we don't lose that. I hope that's the direction that ultimately go. While we fight, we provide an alternative. And that's why I go on these programs, to try to find that common ground, to find that sense of what can be a vision that brings this country together. I call it a new economic patriotism, but there are other people who have other ideas. But what I do know is we have to engage and engage with respect.
Yeah, and I'll say, before kicking it back to Jeremy, like some of these folks like Theo Von have actually been really like strong in terms of talking about the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. And that's a place to build bridges, even if on other issues you don't necessarily agree. And we gotta like that's definitely been our philosophy here. And I mean personally, my philosophy.
I think
Um,
Theo Von is so interesting. I told him this because and I mean this in a very positive way, like the Forrest Gump of podcasters, is that he represents the average American sentiment. I mean, he spends time not talking to members of Congress and policy aides. He talks to his buddies who are in comedy, who are truck drivers, who are blue collar, who are some of them who are college graduates. And he just gets a sense of their pulse. And you know what? This is a kind country. It's a moral country. It's a good country. And they see what's going on and they say, not with our tax dollars. No, that's not who we are.
Yeah, no, I think that that is exactly the kind of politics I resonate with, and that I, hope that we can see come back. This race to the bottom and some of the, tit for tat on social media and the cesspool, and frankly, that has become, is not the brightest of futures that I want my kids to be thinking about as what America's going to be as they come of age in this country. Let me reel it back in. We're on Word on the Street live this week with Congressman Ro Khanna from California. Every Wednesday at 4 p.m., we drop a new episode, sometimes live, sometimes taped. This one happens to be taped with Congressman Khanna, but we do want to see your comments in the Substack chat, and we will be responding and engaging with you on Word on the Street. Congressman, one of the reasons that we scheduled this conversation for now is your leadership of a congressional a letter on the issue of recognition of Palestinian statehood, which is an issue that is really coming to the public forefront more and more. We've seen some countries in Europe for the first time expressing their intent this September at the UN, at the General Assembly, to roll out their bilateral recognition of a state of Palestine. There'll be a big summit and a conference at the UN. And you've got this letter that J Street's really excited to be partnering with you and helping you round up support. In terms of explaining to our viewers who are going to be, of course, helping us lobbying and advocating with their representatives, why is this an important issue, and why is this a good time to be pressing the issue of Palestinian statehood?
Well, first of all, let me just thank you, Jeremy, personally for helping shape my thinking on this and being such a advocate for the approach. Your counsel is invaluable, and there are a few people who I think of more than you. Of course, I have a longstanding friendship with Steve Grossman, who's also been helpful in others, but you really have been an incredible resource. Look, there are three reasons that now is the time. First of all, you have Likud, which has had in its charter for the longest time in Israel that goes from the sea to Jordan. But now you have Ben Gvir and Smotrich and Netanyahu acting on this. I mean, every day that goes by, they are destroying the dream of a Palestinian state. So we need to stand up and say, no, there is going to be a Palestinian state. We're going to recognize the national aspirations. You're not going to kick all of the Gazans out of Gaza. You're not going to build so many settlements in the West Bank that the land swaps become impossible. We are going to have a Palestinian state, demilitarized on 1967 borders with the kind of land swaps that we know. Second, the United States doesn't want to become a pariah in the world. Why do we, on this issue, why should we? It's one thing when the global South, because of their experiences with colonialism and others that empathize with Palestine, recognized a Palestinian state. But it's another thing when now you have France and Australia and Canada and Great Britain all coming out. Why should we be opposed to all of our allies on this issue? It would hurt our standing internationally. It would hurt our standing with the 22 Arab League. And third, this is a moment which we should seize. I mean, I was really impressed with the Arab League statement that they recognized Israel as a Jewish homeland, that they do not believe Hamas should have any possibility in Palestine, that they want to see a Palestinian state free of Hamas with demilitarized. That's promising. And so this is a moment that we should look to the future. I get that the pain of the present and we have to stop it, but human beings also need hope, and we need to offer a glimpse of what can come after the war.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you a couple of questions. I'm going to put on my skeptic hat for a second, only to
Of
just give you
course.
a hard time and give you like the opportunity to respond, because I know this is what we're going to hear. I mean, obviously, I work at J Street and I support this, but these are the two pushbacks that we get. We can do them one at a time. The first is like, what does this actually do? Why take this symbolic step now? Let's just focus on ending the war in Gaza. How do we respond to people who are going to go at you at that direction?
It's about seeing Palestinians' humanity and their aspirations and affirming that. And part of the reason for the conflict that has gotten to this point is too many people have not seen the Palestinian humanity. They have not appreciated that. And this is something that that people will welcome in Palestine and will welcome around the world. So do I think that it is as urgent as stopping offensive weapons to Netanyahu? No. Do I think it is? But do I think it is important and makes a strong moral statement? I do, and especially when you combine that with the expansionism of Gavir and Smotrich and what Netanyahu are trying to do to make this impossible. It's the world saying, no, you will not erase Palestine.
Yeah, and look, I will tell you that that resonates with me just from my own experience talking to Palestinian friends. Even a few years ago, I wrote a piece in the Washington Post in response to potential annexation, saying the response to annexation is recognizing a Palestinian state. Nothing I ever wrote, I've written a lot on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict over the years, got that kind of a response from Palestinian friends and colleagues who were like, thank you.
Interesting.
Thank you. Even though all the time I'm out there advocating, like never have I gotten like that kind of thank you as I did on the statehood issue. The other one like is more, is what you're going to hear from Bibi Netanyahu and others, which is this is rewarding Hamas. You're giving them statehood is a reward to Hamas. Like, so how do you respond to, and a reward for October 7th? How do you respond to that argument?
Well, I haven't been fortunate enough yet to be attacked by Netanyahu. That's one thing that could skyrocket my domestic popularity. So I'm hoping he's going to call me a week or whatever he
We'll
did to the
send him a link
Australian
to
Prime
this
Minister. Maybe you could bait him
podcast.
into it.
You just
Bait
wrote a
him in.
nasty letter to Macron, actually, saying exactly this about,
Yeah,
about
no.
yeah.
Look, how can you Hamas? So many elements of Hamas don't recognize the state of Israel, and they want many parts of them want violent overthrow. So how isn't the fundamental belief that we want two states, not Hamas's dream of the destruction of Israel, and that we want to do it through nonviolent means, actually the ultimate repudiation of Hamas? I mean, and by the way, that Hamas is going to have no role in that. I mean, that is the ultimate repudiation of Hamas. Benjamin Netanyahu has not been able to eradicate Hamas after 2 years of trying. Hamas is still there. And the only way you're going to get Hamas, in my view, to leave Palestinian governance is through having the channels of diplomacy with the Arab states. And so I would just say that it's not rewarding Hamas. It's actually figuring out how to remove Hamas. And then people say, well, this is punitive on Israel. I said, no, it's not punitive. This is about offering a new vision forward. It's about recognizing the hurt and anger of both people. I was talking about the Palestinian state and my call for that at a town hall in Reno. And a Jewish American lady came up to me and said, Ro, I really support what you're doing, but I've got to be honest with you. It pained me that you didn't talk at that moment about the release of the hostages and that you didn't talk about October 7th. And I said, I have so many times. And she said, just please, every time you talk about it, talk about both, because there's hurt and anger and pain on both sides, deep pain, deep anger, deep hurt. And this is about saying, how do we move forward? How do we, I don't, how do we take this incredible tragedy and offer some hope going forward? It's not punitive. It's a sense that we can't have nihilism in that region.
And,
Yeah,
just to echo that, I mean, I just want to make sure it's really clear to everybody who ever watches this that, J Street's number one goal is the return of the hostages and the end of this fighting, and from a pro-Israel point of view, right? This is what we believe, that the recognition of a Palestinian state, and then the consequent normalization of Israel's relations with its neighbors, that is the fulfillment of the dreams of all of those who helped to create the state of Israel. My parents were involved, and my father was involved in the fight for the independence of the state of Israel. And that generation, if you were to tell them that what's on offer is full normalization of Israel's relations with all of its neighbors and an end of 77 years of wars and fighting, they would never have believed that this would be possible within their children's lifetime. And so this is a very pro-Israel positive step. And what it does, and you and I have discussed this, it does lead you to this 23 state solution. And I'm pleased that you have found that to be a useful framework. And I'm hoping that that is something that will catch on a bit more in the Democratic Party, and can become a vision that will excite people in the Jewish community as well as the Palestinian community, because it is something to build for. And I think vision is so important here.
I agree with you completely, and I think that it was coincidental that you coined that before the Arab League letter came out or statement came out, because you're absolutely right, and it's what's different, right? I mean, people say, look, Bill Clinton was one of the great politicians of his era. If he couldn't get peace, if Barack Obama was one of the greatest orators and visionaries couldn't get peace, if President Biden 2 years couldn't get peace, how are we going to do it now? And I say one of the big differences is the 23 state approach. That's a new approach. It wasn't available to the leaders of the past. And the other thing that's different is the politics in this country and the next generation and the sense of that. But I look, I've been as a member of Congress to Israel 3 times. I have deep ties with Silicon Valley and technology. I am a supporter of Israel as a Jewish homeland, as a democratic state. I just think that the way to build peace is ultimately to have a Palestinian state there with self-determination. And I understand, look, I understand in a more serious way. I mean, I understand Prime Minister Netanyahu's family. They came from the pogroms in Russia. I understand the sense that people who wanted to start who believe not just the biblical ties, but that there had to be a safe place for Jews in Israel. And my belief is what you and others are trying for is a way to do that, in the way Rabin did, in the way Shimon Peres did. I mean, Steve Grossman tells me the story about how when he was there in the 1990s with Rabin, and Rabin said, we're going to live side by side with the Palestinians forever. That's not going to change. And that's really where I think we need to go from a values perspective.
I mean, look, I also think that the thing that's beautiful about the 23 state solution and this option now that's available, is that at first I think there was a lot of skepticism on the Palestinian side about it. But I think they've recognized now there's been a move there and an understanding there that this is not something to fight. This is something to take advantage of. And you've had to see that because they had genuine concerns. You're just going to cut us out. And I do worry that's still Bibi Netanyahu's view is let's just skip the Palestinians altogether. That's not our view, obviously. It's not your view, but I think that made Palestinians and still makes Palestinians nervous. But I think they've realized like this is the pathway and the opportunity, which goes very much with your recognition, observations and letter and initiative. And also the other part of this that I just keep hammering home with folks is like, no, the Palestinian Authority is not perfect. They have like many challenges. I think in your letter you talk about the importance of continuing, reforms and democratic reforms. Like it's something that's long been our view and position on this. But if you look at these guys and what they are advocating for and trying to do, and you look at it and compare it to Hamas, there's just no comparison. The difference between one side that wants to use violence and one that is aiming for Palestinian statehood and completely objects to violence. And so that's the other argument that I make. I don't know if you wanted to hop in there. We can also move into one other area that I wanted to talk to you about, which is just also the work you did on Iran and just a couple of months ago in terms of objecting to use of force there and where you think we are on that issue as well.
Sure. Well, I would just say that if people read the letter, they will see that it is clear that there can be no Hamas. It is clear that there needs to be reforms in the PLA. It is clear that there needs to that there can be no arms. That it should be demilitarized. The Palestinians say that is how everyone has talked about a Palestinian state. It is clear that there needs to be democratic election. So it's not this Lindsey Graham view that let's just have Jordan and Egypt or whatever, Jordan and Saudi Arabia run Palestine. It is centering Palestinian national aspirations. And then if they read Secretary Blinken's recent op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, they'll say, well, okay, all of those criteria are actually in the letter. And good people of different views can disagree about the sequencing. My belief is right now the recognition is important and will go a long way in setting a framework. But in terms of the actual stipulations of what that state would look like, I would argue that read Secretary Blinken's op-ed and read our letter, and you will find many of those stipulations in the letter. And that's why I'm hoping we already have 20 signatures on the letter in August recess, and I'm hoping we will get a big number and a big showing, because that really is the vision forward. On Iran, there were two things. One, let's just remember what President Obama achieved. After President Obama, with the help of Jake Sullivan and others, got the Iran nuclear deal, Iran did not enrich uranium beyond 5%. And there was IEAE inspection, and there was not a single documented case of them going over 5% that before Trump ripped up the nuclear deal. Those were the facts. Now, Obama didn't get everything. He didn't get the restrictions on the missiles, and ideally he was pushing for that. And you could have argued that we should have gotten that as well. But the path to that was to continue the diplomacy. Instead, Trump comes in 2018 and he rips it up. Then you start to see Iran cheat, documented cheating. Well, they're cheating after Trump ripped up the deal. And then you have a situation of 20%, I mean, it's 20%, 40%, 60% enrichment. And so this was a total problem created by Donald Trump and the failure to follow Obama's approach. Now Trump comes in and he bombs these sites, but you still have the nuclear fuel there. You've kicked out the IEAE, and you have a situation where maybe you buy yourself a year, maybe you buy yourself a year and a half, but you've done nothing to have monitoring of the program, and to make sure that the fuel isn't being enriched, or that they aren't going to be able to put the fuel when they rebuild the missiles within a year on nuclear capability. So it feels good from a short-term perspective, but it is not a long-term solution. And we, again, as a Democratic Party, should be following the approach Obama had to have a long-term solution. And if Trump did that today with a weakened Iran, I would actually support it. There are times I've supported Trump doing things in terms of diplomacy, but he's shown no appetite to do that.
Yeah. And you'd be happy to know that Ilan was part of the team in the Obama years that brought that deal to bear.
Well, thank you. That was great. I mean, that was really a historic achievement. It was a historic achievement not just because they made Iran on a path to not having a nuclear weapon. It was a reset after the overthrow of Mossadegh, which came about because Mossadegh wanted to nationalize Iranian oil, and the British didn't want that. I mean, the British, a lot of the challenges in the region were partly an outgrowth of British colonialism. And I don't just say that because my grandfather spent 4 years in jail with Gandhi. It's just those are the facts. And Obama was trying for a fundamental reset of that region. And it's just a shame that approach wasn't continued.
Yeah, and I wanted to say one thing, Jeremy, which is like I don't want to take too much credit for that. Like I worked on Iran like in the earlier years of the Obama administration, and was kind of out by the time they really got to the deal, but very strong supporter. And like I like to think that a lot of the work we did in the years previous like helped get us to that point. But anyway, but sorry.
And I was just going to say that it was great to find out that we have something else in common, Ro, which is that my father was jailed by the British for his fighting against the British. So we have this.
I did not know that.
Well, listen, we're about ready to wrap things up here. I did want to conclude, though, pulling back the lens a little bit, And just looking at the challenges we have in this country, this is J Street is an organization that is pro-Israel, pro-peace, but pro-democracy. And we added the pro-democracy part of our mission and our tagline in the wake of the first Trump term and the challenge to the 2020 election. And we are in a moment when we are under severe threat to our very democratic principles. And I think that that's really the core issue. We work day in and day out on Israel, Palestine, and on Iran and foreign policy and all of that. But I'm curious, as sort of some final thoughts, we're 6 months plus now into the Trump term. We've seen some of the things that they are trying to do. What do you think Democrats are getting right in taking this fight to the Republicans? What are they not getting right? What's the case that the Democratic Party needs to be making in order to win this battle in 26 and 28?
I think we are much stronger today in terms of our fight and response than we were a few months into the term. In the first few months, we were too acquiescent. We were voting for things like the Laken Riley bill. Not everyone, but too many Democrats, which allowed Trump the authority to deport without due process. There was a sense of let's just try to cut a deal with him. We should not have had the Senate go along with the continuing resolution of the budget. But now you have Democrats saying, look, we're going to play hardball. The governor of my state saying if they're going to redistrict in ways that are going to gut the Voting Rights Act, well, then we will redistrict in response. You have the Epstein file, which has cut across party lines. Thomas Massey and I are leading that on September 3rd, where we're going to force a vote and Trump losing support there. You have the coffee tariff that is hitting people in tariffs. Look, we fought a revolution in this country over the tax on tea. People are not going to like the tax on coffee when we produce only 1%. You know, people doing town halls and rallies across this country and fighting back. So I think that the Democrats are finding our voice. There are two things I would say we need to do better. At the same time that we fight, we have to offer an alternative. We have to offer a vision of where we want to take this nation, about how we're going to tackle the income divides, how we're going to tackle the anxiety with AI and job displacement, how we're going to have a vision that heals some of the divisions in this country around the economy, around class, around geography, around race, and bring us together. And this is where I think J Street can play the biggest role, because all the people in your organization are deeply active and they're civically engaged. And one of the things I have often said is before anyone will believe that we can bring the country together, we have to show that we can bring the party together. We have to show that there's a place in this party for Mamdani, and there's a place in this party for Steve Grossman, and there's a place for Tony Blinken, and there's a place for Joe Biden and Barack Obama and people who supported Bill Clinton. If we can't unify the Democratic Party, how are we going to convince the American people that we can unify the country? And J Street, I think, are bridge builders by temperament. Bridge builders not just in the Middle East, bridge builders in our nation and in our party. And their work in helping us bridge the divides in our party and then ultimately perhaps in our community and country is what we need most. I think that is what this country desperately seeks in years in 26 and beyond.
Well, I thank you very much for that. I think that bridge is exactly what we hope to build. It's paved with the values that we share across the Democratic Party: a belief in everybody's equal rights, a belief that everybody deserves freedom, a belief in democracy and diplomacy. There's some very core values that I think can bridge the gaps in the party on some difficult issues. And it is exciting to have this conversation with Congressman Ro Khanna, who's going to be one of the voices shaping that future for the Democratic Party and for the United States. I am really grateful to you for taking the time to join Ilan and me here on Word on the Street Live, and we look forward to working together in the coming weeks to build up the level of support for the letter you're circulating related to recognition. And we will be having an advocacy day in September up on the Hill with our leaders from around the country, urging people to sign on in advance of that UN summit the following week. So this is an important time, and we thank you so much for your leadership.
Thank you. Thank you, Ilan. Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you both for your leadership. And thank you to everyone in J Street for your involvement.
Thank you, Congressman.
All right. We'll see you all next week, 4 p.m. Wednesdays.